Peace, and welcome. We're glad you're here. This is the Cook on Monday Morning podcast. I am here with the homie, Shawn Drost.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning, Shawn.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm feeling kind of nutty right now. I hope it doesn't go too wild because I was up all night with my little baby boy, Pax, 7 months old, and he's sick.
Yeah. You were telling me about that. He's a beautiful baby.
Yeah.
I'm sorry he's sick. At Cook on Monday Morning, we believe that if you own Monday morning, you can own the week. If you own the week, you can own the year. And if you change your year, you can change your life. And so Shawn and I have been friends for at least 5 years. And his story is really incredible. He started and built a bunch of various businesses, all of which I want to get into. And I appreciate you coming, man.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You have a unique perspective as a founder because a lot of people come to this town looking to build a company, and one of the aspirational goals is to sell it, and you've done that.
Yeah. Me and my two best friends from college started a school for computer programmers called Hack Reactor and sold it about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Hack Reactor, was called the Harvard of coding schools.
that was our marketing. A funny story about that. That came from a piece of press, and it was a quote from a employer that hired some of our grads. Mm-hmm. But that guy was just a big fan, and he was like, "What do you guys want me to say?"
Okay. Well, it caught steam. What was Hack Reactor?
So Hack Reactor, it was and still is a school for computer programmers. Mm-hmm. Our normal student was like 25 to 35. About 3/4 had some kind of college level degree, but usually not in software. And people wanted to learn to code and get a job. And it turns out that's a field where you don't actually need to have a relevant college degree. Because learning to code, because programming is kind of like speaking like Spanish or something. Like you can interview someone and find out if they can do it, and so you can progress into that job market without a relevant degree. Mm-hmm. So we taught people the skills. We taught people to be able to get through those interviews and to be able to be productive in those jobs. Mm-hmm. And over the course of the years that we ran the school, taught about 4,000 people to code and help them get their first jobs. And it works and still is a great area of opportunity for anybody who's listening, who's interested in software or interested in building things. Like if you love Legos or if you love fixing things or if you love like creating things and kind of working on puzzles, mm-hmm. It's like a great field to go into, and there's still a lot of opportunity there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I heard about that, I heard that Galvanize just got bought too.
Right. Yeah. Earlier this week, the company that bought
Galvanize bought Hack Reactor. Go ahead.
Galvanize bought Hack Reactor, and then earlier this week, Galvanize got bought by a public company called K-12.
Right.
Yeah. And a funny story about that is that way back in the day, Hack Reactor bought this little tiny school called Maker Square, and along the way, the CEO of Maker Square became the CEO of Hack Reactor, and then became the CEO of Galvanize. And so whoever's the CEO of K-12 right now, just watch out, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Why?
Harsh is probably going to go be the CEO of K-12.
Oh, got it. Oh, so they come for everywhere. Got it. Okay, makes sense. So what was Hack Reactor purchased for?
It was about $20 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was Galvanize purchased for?
About 160, something like that.
160 million.
Yeah.
All right. Now you talked about you and your friends founding the company. What was that initial conversation like? What happened?
Well, what was the initial conversation? I can't really remember like exactly where it started, but I guess when things really got started, it wasn't about a company. It was about me and Marcus were teaching Tony to code. And, he was this really smart guy who was sort of like in college, he was on a pre-med path. But then he like volunteered at a hospital and was like, wait a second, doctors don't like their jobs. I don't want to be a doctor. And so then he was like, kind of bounced around, like did a Fulbright. He was a really smart guy. And eventually we were like, Tony, you should be a programmer because this is great. You just like get to like make stuff all day and sort of like invisible puzzles, and the money's good, and like you get to like it's kind of there's a little bit of creative aspects to it, and like it's a lot of fun if you get into it. It's a lot of fun. And so we taught him to code and helped him get his first job, and then at some point we saw there was this really steep rise of these kinds of schools, the coding boot camps. There was this little one out east in DC, and then another one in San Francisco that Tony went to. And he went there kind of like as a finishing school, and he ended up kind of basically being a teacher there at first, like for his class, and then he officially got hired. And then for a lot of reasons, he wound up not staying there and moved into, and then we all just decided to start school together.
And so it was the three of you initially that started Hack Reactor? Well,
it was the three of us plus our buddy Doug, who Tony had met in the other school, which was called Dev Boot Camp. So it was the four of us that started Hack Reactor.
What year was this?
This was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so how did it start? Like you rented space? Like what was, you recruited students? What did that first class look like?
How did it look? So we were talking about so it was a really funny period, really fun period, and like fun to look back on. But we kind of started by just picking a day. Like this is when the first day of classes are going to be. And then we picked a day that, if I remember correctly, it was 7 weeks from the day that we were starting. We were like, first day of classes in 7 weeks. And we were like, okay, so we put up a website that said like first day of classes on this date. And you can apply here. We didn't even have a price on the website or a location or anything. We were just a website. And what we had was, we had this ironclad, is that me and Marcus were hiring managers. We knew exactly what it took to get through the interview process. And we were working at good companies. Marcus was at Twitter. I was at OkCupid. And we knew how to teach. We had been tutors and teachers, and we had just taught Tony, and we knew what it would take, and we knew how to get there. Marcus was running like an internal learning program at Twitter. So we knew all that. We launched the website, and we just emailed everyone we knew. And then what really got us probably 3/4 of our attention was we launched on Hacker News, which is a little like website that computer programmers, it's still popular among computer programmers. And so from there we got, I don't know, like 300 or 400 email addresses. And then we just like go and meet with everyone we can and like get coffee and talk to them about code and try and see where they were. And if they already knew like 5% of the material and they liked it, then we said basically you're in. And we tried to convince them to join up with us. And so that was kind of like how we went about talking to students and finding our first class. And in that way, we kind of gradually assembled a class of like 17. And it was really funny because, it was like a train kind of going down these tracks, and you're just sort of like running along, putting the track out in front of the train. Like one day somebody was like, okay, I'm ready to send a check in. Who do I make the check out to? And we were like, I don't know. So I literally walked on the street, and there was a law office, and I went in the front door of a law office, and I was like, I need a company. I was like, one company, please. I need a bank account. I think to get a bank account, I need a company, and I know I can file the paperwork myself, but this was a firm called WSGR, and I knew that they did a lot of startup companies, and I knew that we might want to raise investment one day. So I was like, I want to do it right, and I don't want to mess up the incorporation. So we, that's how we got our first bank account, is just like, we needed to cash a check. So we needed a company. So then we went and incorporated by walking into the law office off the street. And everything was like that. We we had a really good like roadmap of what their curriculum would look like, but we only had maybe like a week or 10 days worth of curriculum when the first day of class started. And then after that ran out, like it was just stay up until 2, 3, 4 in the morning every night and get the next day ready. And it was ridiculous, but also extremely fun. That first class is just like full of great people, and still friends with those people to this day. And 2 of them kind of dropped out along the way, and one of them deferred to the next class, but the other 14 got jobs within 3 months. I want to say it was probably more like 2 months.
So was that 12-week school the model when it first started, or was it shorter?
Okay. Yeah, we it was 12 weeks long, 6 days a week, really long hours, and really we kind of like set ourselves up from the start as like there were at this point already like 4 or 5 different coding boot camps, and there was like the original one, and there was the free one, the one where you don't pay tuition until later, and we were like, we're gonna be the one that the serious one, the one that really strives for like more depth of learning, the quality one basically, and the one that like the students who really want to go far and set themselves up for success try and apply for, and kind of like the first choice. So we had that in mind from the start, and that was that worked really well for us, and we got lots of great students, and there's just a lot of magic that happens in a classroom when you can like get good peers together and they can learn from each other. It's so beautiful. I mean, this.
Yeah. I love stories about how things start, because I think it helps break down some apprehension or perceived barriers, because you hear like, oh, I sold a company for $20 million, but you don't necessarily hear, oh yeah, me and my friends taught another friend, we walked into a law office, But what I don't want to, we're friends, like we're actually like really friends, right? And I want people to get to know you a little bit, because the person like the person I've gotten to know is really interested in solving problems, like making their community better, being there for people. It's not flash and pizzazz. Is like just diligent and interested in seeing things work better. And so I want to get into you a little bit and then come back to the business stuff. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Hawaii. I was born on Kauai, and I lived there until I was 8, and then I moved to Oahu. I mostly lived on Oahu until I went to college in LA and moved back and lived there for a while. And just really still love Hawaii so much. But I was really interested and oriented towards like my work, and I was interested in software, and I like had these occasions to come out to the Bay for that. And for me, it was just so exciting because, if you're into something, to walk into the mecca of that place and to walk in, like to be able to be alive and present for like the golden age of that happening. For me, it was like being a painter in Florence in the Renaissance. It was like, wow, look at this. This is so amazing. How can I like be a part, And so I moved to the Bay a lot later, but yeah, I loved being a kid in Hawaii, and my family was like so rooted there, and it was so beautiful. My parents moved there because they were hippies basically, and they met over there and lived there for 40 years and raised kids there. And I still go back as much as I can.
Yeah. So and what did your parents do?
My mom was a teacher. She taught every which grade. She taught all the way from pre-K. She used to play guitar for her preschool kids. She taught like special ed, or what was then called special ed. I think that's
still, yeah.
It's still? Oh. And she taught pregnant teens. She taught high school and middle school. She taught everything. And my dad was a construction worker. He was a safety guy, safety administrator. And built stuff.
Yeah. Where'd you go to college?
I went to USC, University of Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
And am I remembering this correctly? Did you do the Peace Corps?
No.
What did you
something
lived?
like that?
Okay,
so I moved to Guatemala after college, and just decided to like try and set up some kind of, I guess now it would be called a social enterprise, or I thought of it as a nonprofit at the time. It was kind of like Etsy, but I was like just trying to hook up just people who make stuff there. There's a really beautiful culture of like handmade textiles and like all of this like really cool creation, and there's like all this like awesome pre-Columbian fashion and everything that just survived intact in the mountains and is still there to this day. You can go hang out with people that walk around just like rolling with these like crazy beautiful hand-woven shirts and dresses and everything. And so yeah, I went and tried to wire up like credit card payments and marketing and shipping, actually with Tony, who I later started Hack Reactor with.
Okay.
And that was just such a wild experience. And it was really formative for me in terms of like connecting my interest in just like being useful and like contributing and like trying to plug something in. It really kind of turned me towards, turned my like interest in helping people and being like a contributor towards like basically business. And like, it was just really strange and surprising to me to like be nudged every day while doing that work towards like, you know what, you actually have to be a middleman. That wasn't my intention, but for a lot of logistical reasons, in order to accomplish the outcome and the benefit to the people that I wanted, I had to actually take ownership of the the product in order to ship it, in order to be able to market it appropriately, in order to be able to like take photographs of it and then put it on the website and to make sure it would still be there when people wanted to buy it and so on. And then, so there were all these different things. And so that was pretty formative in that way. And I also learned Spanish and just like learned a lot about life and being grown up and an entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah. Because that's a bit unorthodox. Like someone graduates from college and there's all these expectations to find a job. Maybe if you have debt, pay down debt. And then you moved out of the country. Yeah.
Well, I had, I don't know how this happened exactly, but like my parents didn't have a lot of money. I was on financial aid, but somehow it wound about, and I was like working, I had work study, and I was like earning money as much as I could all the way through college. But like for some reason, and I think it was because my sister and I were in college at the same time, somehow like that benefited us in terms of financial aid. And I wound up graduating from college with like $4,000 in a bank account. And that actually goes really far in, most of the world. And so I was able to like move abroad and just like live on the cheap and like just work in a little internet cafe for many months. And then that money ran out, and I had a credit card where they like $1,000 limit. I called them and got them to change it to $3,000. I just took it out in cash. So then I stayed a few more months, and so that was how I managed that and did that. Before I did that, I had interviewed and gotten a job at Chevron and turned it down. I was still wondering what life would have been like if I gone that way. That would have been a whole different path.
Right.
I'm glad I didn't.
What was the job at Chevron?
Software engineering. They had this like really amazing, beautiful like data visualization room. If it like now of course I know where that whole industry and chapter leads in terms of like the health of the planet.
Right.
And but if it wasn't for that, like the like incredible like technical challenges and like the incredible resources that they spend on like doing all this like mapping and visualization and like sensing and crazy science that they do, it's all really interesting and cool. It's just such a shame that it's being used to destroy things.
Right. Yeah. Because when I came out of college, like the idea was I had to try to find a comfortable living, and you look for that, and you look for some sort of validation from the company and the salary that you have, right? I imagine that Chevron wants to be competitive. They're going to offer their software engineers a competitive salary. But you said, forget that. I'm gonna take my $4,000 and bet on myself and go to a country where I don't speak the language.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of benefits. And the number one thing that I don't really remember what I was thinking at the time.
Yeah, what did that come from? Can you?
I would say like the main benefit that I had was just the knowledge that like I knew how to program, and that was an extremely employable skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a giant safety net in that form. And then also I have, I don't remember thinking about this a lot, but I know it's a part of like my mindset. I had like this awesome family that if I needed to go crash on my parents' couch, that was always kind of an option,
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I can't remember why or how I thought or realized it was possible to do that. I don't know.
Just went
For it.
Yeah. So it's not, were you there 7 months or a year? How long were you down there?
Yeah, about a year.
Okay. So a year, then you come back. Where do you land?
I went back to Hawaii and started working I just interviewed for every programming job on Oahu. There's not that many of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I eventually got a job building a social network at this nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm.
And stayed there for about a year. Started doing contracting work on the side. That wound up being just kind of a better gig.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did contracting work for the next like 3 years or so.
Okay. And what brought you to San Francisco?
Well, I would come here every now and then because of like kind of basically just work conferences. So there would be the event that comes to mind first is Startup School. There was this event called Startup School that was run by this investment firm called Y Combinator, and they get together like this like buzzing room of like excited people, and you just sort of like hang out with all these people that are interested in what you're into and get to like talk about the future and what are you working on, what are you using, how are you making stuff, like what are your techniques, and you guys like go back and apply it.
Mm-hmm.
And you and all kinds of fun stuff happen. I at the time I went to an after party at Startup School, and it was at this like little loft that I was like talking to the people that lived there, and there are these like really gangly dudes, and they're like, yeah, our company is called Airbnb, and it's like blah blah blah, and it was just it was just the three of them at that point or something, and I remember saying like, what a bad idea it was, basically. Which is something I reflect back on a lot now. Whenever I'm about to tell someone I don't like their idea, I'm always preface it with like, just like caveat here, my ideas are often wrong, and I said something anyway. So
you have some right ones too.
you got a couple right ones that outweighs a lot of wrong ones. So it was really fun, like getting together with all these people and getting excited about all these different technologies and directions and developments and opportunities that you could build something new, and it was just a lot of excitement. And I think that there was a really bright and positive energy to those days that I think is like very different now. People didn't really comprehend or expect that like there would be a lot of complications or downsides of any of this stuff. It just seemed like, oh, great, we can invent some new stuff, and like there was just so much like naivete and hubris and all this other stuff going on also. But like at the time it was just really exciting, and so that was what drew me in this direction. That and the fact that like I think the thing that pushed me over the edge. I knew a bunch of people here too. And one day, Marcus, who I eventually started Hack Reactor with, called me and Tony up, and he was like, all right, guys, let's get the band back together. Let's like move in together in a place in San Francisco. We had kind of been talking about moving, like I had been talking about moving to San Francisco from Hawaii. Tony was teaching English in Korea at the time, or actually he was running a school. I left that part of the story out, but he was running a language immersion school.
Okay.
At the time in Korea.
Applicable.
So Marcus called us and he was like, I'm getting the band back together. Let's do it. Let's do this. And so we all moved in about a block and a half from here on Oak Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oak Street. Okay. And then how long after that was Hack Reactor started? What year was that?
That was 2011.
Okay.
So it wasn't long after that. It was like a year and change after that Hack Reactor, that we started Hack Reactor.
Yeah. And you sold Hack Reactor in 2018 or 19?
18, yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
And so we met, like one of the things I sometimes do is like tell about the story about how I met people, you know? And so the founding of Mission Bit comes through Hack Reactor. The founder of Mission Bit was a student at Hack Reactor. His name is Tyson Dowdery. And Tyson lived in the Mission. He had this idea of wanting to do a nonprofit, but didn't know what. He wanted to change careers. He came to Hack Reactor. And after Hack Reactor, he was like, oh, I want to have a free program for kids that teaches coding. And so when I met Tyson in 2014, 2 years after your school started. And it was just a volunteer-run organization. And so I met Tyson on Twitter. Like I was running for school board and I was talking to a lot of schools about, talking to a lot of kids about learning to build the games they love to play. And all the kids I was meeting would like flip out. They were super excited about that idea, like learning how to build the games they love to play. Yeah. And so I started to reach out to organizations that were doing it, and Mission Bit was the one I found on Twitter. And so you're kind of how I got to Mission Bit in an indirect way.
Well, Tyson's how you got to Mission Bit.
All these things build on each other.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great things too, just about telling these stories on this podcast, is that like people hear these stories and then they could be trying something to spark something new, and then they go off and do something. But you always have to give credit where credit is due.
I still find that so beautiful. And like we one of the things that was really exciting to us about starting the school and kind of what it would look like and how it would work is the kinds of like crazy, like this person bounces off this idea and then like suddenly this thing happens and like, and we named the school and we thought about this like from the start and like that was always really exciting for us. And that's why we called it Hack Reactor, is this idea of like a chain reaction and like get everyone together and like boom, like suddenly something like crazy and unexpected happens. And there were so many fun stories like that. And I just love that Mission Bit came out of that. I'm just so grateful that like we wound up being able to be a part, and like that like Tyson was able to like take what he learned and all of his like bright, beautiful spirit and then like make Mission Bit a thing. How cool. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it was him, it was Tyson and like a few volunteers, and they had started a program or two at different high schools. So it wasn't a budget. It was just passion. Yeah. It was passion for coding. Right. And we, from there, Tyson soon stepped away after I started. And from there, we took Mission Bit across the city and into Oakland. And you took Hack Reactor all over the state, right? All over the country. We had... Excuse me. All over the country. Please. Yeah, we were up and running in San Francisco, LA, Austin, New York. And at our high water mark, we went through some ups and then later some downs. But at our high water mark, we were up and running in Chicago as well. And we had an online school. We had several hundred people go through an online version of the program. This just you sit in front of a video camera Monday to Saturday, all day long, every day, and like that was a whole nother fun chapter of the program. That's where like all these like parents and people out in like non-tech hubs would like join up and like be able to be a part from some totally far off different contexts. Yeah. I want to get into housing while I have you,
Because I know you care a lot about housing.
Oh my gosh, it's so interesting. I mean, it's so.
But before I do that, before we go on housing, I'm just setting it up. I know. I want to let you rip. And so, because I think there's an interesting juxtaposition around, okay, you're a tech founder, the association around housing being so limited is because the influx of tech. Mm-hmm. And your mindset on housing is about like people. It's about like getting people housed. So I'm gonna let you do it, right? But you also built a house, and it's my closest. I love San Francisco, but I love New Orleans.
Oh my god! Let's get into New Orleans.
And so when people talk about different issues, I just want to say that you have the experience of actually building a home. So talk about New Orleans, and then let's talk about housing.
Well, I didn't actually. I
thought you and your dad built the. Go ahead.
No, I couldn't build anything that beautiful.
Okay.
So I left a couple chapters out, but at a different point in my life, I was a musician and I was on tour with my friend who's a singer-songwriter in Portland, and we played shows all across the country, all over the place, and. We had a few shows in New Orleans, and we were like, this is the best city. Mm-hmm. This is the number one city. This is the most beautiful, soulful, incredible place with just like so much energy and interaction and good community everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, we got to come back here. And then one day, like 5 years later, my friend moved there. And she was like, Shawn, let's somehow like make a writer's residency and like bookstore and coffee shop happen here. And it was me and her sister and this other partner. And they went out and found a house that was for sale that had been abandoned for like 6 years or something. I want to say this was like it had been abandoned since Katrina. It had like holes in the roof, like a lot of water damage, but really good like bones to the house. And you could just see how beautiful it was. And like the kind of like construction and like the kind of quality of materials and everything, like you can't do that today. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible anymore. Those trees aren't standing anymore. Mm. And so we bought this house. We were one of the two offers to buy this house. The other one was the CVS was going to turn it into a parking lot.
Oh, whoa.
And they actually outbid us by $50,000. But the family decided that they didn't want it to be a parking lot. Right. And they wanted to they met us and understood what our intentions were, and they liked that. And that was more important to them, which I think is just another one of the million things that makes New Orleans what it is, is that people actually care about what they're doing and about they have a sense of place, Mm-hmm.
So what's the name of the writing residency?
It's called the New Orleans Writers Residency. Okay. And you can go check it out. There's 6 residents over there right now, just like jamming on whatever they're working on. And I'm actually going out to visit and meet up with those folks this weekend. And
what ward is it in New Orleans?
It's in 9th Ward.
It's in the 9th Ward.
Yeah.
And so
7th Ward.
7th Ward.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, it's a great neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you bought a home in the 7th Ward, renovated it, and opened a writing residency.
Yeah.
What does the program for the writing residency look like?
So it's a month long, and it's really about giving people space and time to write. It's like there's not a lot of programming and complications to it. We put out breakfast every morning. Mm-hmm. There's like we kind of organize like 1 or 2 events a week. Mm-hmm. This time around, actually, the writers are doing a little bit of teaching, and like there's a couple of different occasions for them to meet up with and learn from and teach to the like incredible local scene. But other than that, it's just space and time, and we give them a stipend to just write for a month straight.
Nice.
And we open up applications in like June, and then close them in September, and then read like 300 essays, and then pick out six people,
Right.
Poets, screenwriters, playwrights, fiction of all stripes, creative nonfiction. What I think sets us apart, there's a lot of residency programs, and they can often be like, I didn't know very much about writers' residencies. The idea makes immediate sense to me as a person who has a really difficult time focusing. So I didn't need any more explanation than those two words when Kat first started talking to me about it. But I looked into it since then. I've learned about like what residencies are like. They're often these very like expensive, formal, credential-oriented affairs, and that was just not at all how we roll, and that was just not how we set it up. So we are pretty intentional about about half of our residents wind up having MFAs, and the other half don't. And there's like a really wide mix of people. We set it up as a stipend and no fee residency, because we wanted to like make it accessible depending like to people that couldn't take a month off and not have any money coming in. We know at least they're going to be able to like get food going, and cover some basics, and we cover transport to and from.
Right.
So we eventually launched the residency. I think we spent like 3 years trying to restore the house, and went about it. Me and my dad and my mom and all the partners were out there like with hammer and nails, and we had to rebuild about a quarter of the roof, and then like re-roof everything, and there's a lot of demolition to be done. And then the place felt like a squat for like 2 years. And then, little by little, we made a lot of missteps, made a lot of progress. And then one day you kind of like close up the walls, you put up the drywall in the room that we had to knock the plaster out. And then suddenly everything was like, it was like, at that point you can like clean the floors and like surface the floors because you're not doing any more of the work that's going to ruin that. And then suddenly it's just like the quality and like amazingly beautiful materials of the place just popped out. And now it just feels like this incredible like trip into like I've heard it called like I've done a lot of video conferences in the place, and so like I'll be working from there, and like somebody will say like, where are you? Is that like a bordello, or is that like where are you in a cigar club? Are you in a like just kind of New Orleans has a lot of those like turn of the century kind of luxury like weird curtains, like heavy everything. I don't know, and everything is it's really beautiful in there now. We put in a custom bookshelf, and like it has a really good vibe now.
Nice. Yeah, well, I wanted you to tell that story because I think that does get behind the spirit that you think about housing. It's like let's restore, let's make something that's value add, let's keep people, let's get people here that like want to be here. It's not like how do I make a quick buck? You know? And so now housing in the Bay Area. Go.
I mean, I don't know, man. It's just so, what do you say? I mean, I moved to San Francisco, 8 or 9 years ago now or something. And even by then it was an expensive place to live. It was either the second most or already the most expensive place to live in the country. And since then, things have just gone up. It's just so crazy. And like, even at the late date I arrived, I watched so many beautiful things get pushed out of the city, and so much like thriving, long-standing, centers of place and culture, and people with deep roots like just not fit here anymore. And it's really dire. And so I'm really sad about that. And I don't feel like anybody knows what to do about that or has any kind of like, I don't know what to do about that. There's a lot of stuff that seems like a good idea. I also have to admit a certain amount of ignorance is not my field. And I don't know too much about it, but it seems to me like that we should probably build some more houses, and we should probably have better, like we should probably be doing about 10 times more work about displacement and like helping keep like all these deep-rooted, beautiful old trees of institutions, give them the tools and opportunities to like remain in place. And like all the people that make this place what it is, like it's so sad to see all that getting pushed out. And then, it goes across the bridge and the same thing's happening in Oakland now. And then, or it has been. I don't know. I mean, I'm really sad about it, and it's something that I care about a lot. And I thought about working on that next. I'm probably heading in a different direction, but I don't know. I remain an interested spectator, and I'm like, there's this thing happening right now in California politics, SB 50. I don't know how much you heard about that, but I'm a big fan of it. I moved to Berkeley with my wife. She's a Berkeley girl, and like there's a big thing going on right now about building housing over the parking lots at the North Berkeley BART and Ashby BART, and I live near the North Berkeley BART, and I'm like really rallied behind that. And I don't know, just the way that we organize the city and the way that we do things. I mean, to me, seems like a really big experiment that I don't know. I don't think it doesn't seem like it's doing good stuff. Like the way we organize the city, like in order to build something, in order to like, people moving here are trying to find a place to live, and it's really hard for developers to put up new stuff for people moving here. And I don't know of any mechanism to prevent people from moving here. And if we don't build stuff for like to absorb the like newcomers, then I don't know how to prevent the economic pressure from like squeezing people out. So I think I don't know too much about this stuff, but it's certainly something that everybody in the city is just heartbroken by, to see what's happening and like to see the level of economic hardship that it puts on basically everyone who's not hella rich.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of interesting dynamics too, because I know because housing is so expensive, it's attractive to a lot of people that have money. There's multiple things happening at once, right? Because affordability and displacement needs to be a top priority of the city. And so it's mostly talked about as a supply issue. Like, how do we solve for supply? But if we add more supply and it's bought up by a few people that have the money, and then they try to rent it out, it's just like there's some blocking and tackling that needs to happen to ensure that the housing we build goes to the people that were looking to get it. And so that requires, I would say, some interventions that, understand the market, but are trying to support long-term residents that want to own here, or people that have been displaced that want to come back. And when someone is developing a project, there's a lot of cost involved, there's a lot of financing, and they're trying to get a return. Yeah. And so there's these different interests at play.
I mean, to what you said about like, there's a lot of focus on supply. I think you're right. I think it's probably like a little too much focus on supply, and it's so important. So, I mean, I love it that there's progress being made. I think that probably more focus should be put in like better programs around like, how do you prevent and undo displacement? I mean, I don't really know I don't know the answers, but I think you're right. It's like it's not as simple as just like build some more condos, build some more apartment buildings. It's not that simple. Yeah.
So that's happening. Like, but then there's also a huge resistance to new projects in longstanding neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so the residents that have been here, like, my grandmother, my family's been here since the late 1940s.
Yeah.
And the increased density, for a longstanding Black family, right? We haven't seen density result in more diversity.
Right.
Like we've seen a city that intentionally pushed out the Black community,
right,
made way for developers to make a lot of money.
I don't feel like any piece was made of that. I don't feel like that story is really widely known or told. I feel like that's just so sad and horrifying. Like everything that happened with all of, I mean, we don't even have a new word to call what was called urban renewal. But I mean, like we need something that sounds more like Holocaust. I mean, it's so awful. Like, and yeah, you mentioned that like the longstanding communities that like see density, and where that always goes is those like communities that don't have the political sway. And so you see all of the big buildings going in those like historically underrepresented or like disenfranchised voters or whatever. Like, the mission has gone way built up. And so like everything, yeah, I mean, I don't, I think that like keeping equity at the heart of how that happens is got to happen. I think that like longstanding residents, I mean, I'm not in a position, or I'm not competent to know like how the compromises should be made. Like, and I think the longstanding residents that are going to get impacted by density, like, I don't know how that should work. But from what I can tell, like the density does decrease displacement. And what you said about it doesn't really like bring a more diverse crowd around. Like it doesn't make the city more diverse in terms of the newcomers. I agree with that, and I don't really know how the dynamics of cities do or should work. I mean, it's all a mystery to me.
It hasn't in this place, but if the policy were or could be, how do we resolve that? And one I think low hanging fruit way to achieve that is to create programs where like the public sector has pathways to ownership in the city. And so if you look at muni drivers, a lot of them are Black.
Yeah.
And so what are their home ownership? Like my dad is one of them, right? And I have my first cousin. I have a lot of cousins that are muni drivers.
Yeah.
And so
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And for our paraeducators and you've seen a lot of the school district now.
Yeah.
And now you have a kid. And so you're going to see a lot more of how schools work. But, pathways for educators, all of the workforces that we know have been committed to the city and that will be committed here.
Yeah.
We saw multiple problems at once if density has them in mind.
Yeah, I think people like have a lot of mistrust about the government for reasons that I don't know what to think about it. But one thing I can say about the government in this city and kind of in general is that they're doing so much more serious work about equity and like doing so much better on that front in terms of like hiring and pay and like supporting unions and everything than anyone in the private sector is like leaps and bounds. So like some centering policy around like public sector and employees of the public sector, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, yeah.
It's just it's one pathway to explore because if we're going to go on the route of more housing, which the city has to do, how do we ensure it goes to the people that make our city great?
Yeah.
So you fell in love, you got married, you had a kid.
I did, yeah. Yeah.
And you ran away to Berkeley.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The traditional migratory patterns of
right. Yeah, it's so common.
You know me, just basic over here.
When did you leave San Francisco? What year was it? It was
last year. Yeah,
last year.
Yeah.
And you and your wife and son now live in Berkeley, right?
Yeah, it was really sad for me. I didn't want to go. My wife and I thought about it so much. We were looking at we were like real estate shopping, and I like dragged her to all these places in San Francisco, and she like actually started crying. She just like was so messed up just trying to imagine living here. She just hated it so much. She grew up in Santa Cruz County and it's just like not a city person, and it was just so sad for me because like San Francisco really has this feeling of home for me that is really important to me, and I didn't really have for a long time since I left Hawaii. You know, and it kind of like became this place that has these like, you know, enough layers of memory and emotion that you get to like, okay, this is home now. And I broke my rule about not crossing the bridge to go on a date, and look what happened, man. Look what happened.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's great. No, I have no regrets, but it was really sad for me to like to move across the move into the East Bay. I mean, love Berkeley. So much great stuff there. Beautiful beautiful garden. Such a great garden culture. Love it.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, that is a very common thing. People come here, they start a career, they fall in love, they have kids. The conversation around, you know, raising a family kind of takes people to various parts of the East Bay. But you've been a person that's built things, right? And now you have this family that like, you know, needs your love and attention. But I know that itch to build is still in you. So, So in broad strokes, like what's next for Shawn?
Oh, well, I had like a 7-year long list of projects and businesses that I wanted to get into. And I quit my job at Galvanize in November. And then since then, I basically decided to go into something to do with like sustainability, climate, ecosystem, like something.
Okay.
And I'm going to start with a study period. I don't really know too much about that field. It's not a field. It's like 70 fields. It's like, how does the planet work? But I'm gonna try and learn what I can for a few months and then see where it takes me. But yeah, that's where I'm headed. I'm gonna join or start some organization, maybe a nonprofit or maybe a company. You know, I'll just see what happens. But I'm just oriented around like trying to like not trying to see a slowdown and stop of like all the damage that we're seeing to the environment and, you know, the rate that we're losing species and biodiversity and the like real credible risk to just major devastation in our lifetime, in my son's lifetime, like what's already happening now with like all these wildfires, all these like, you know, Katrina was the 5th or 4th Category 5 hurricane in the season, which was the first time that had happened. That was the first time that we had so many of those big hurricanes in one season since we invented what a Class 5 is. And you know, like nobody can say if any one fire or hurricane or whatever is because of climate, but like all that kind of thing is what's happening. And it, you know, it doesn't take a lot of science to see that's different now than even when we were kids. Yeah.
Well, that's actually that touches on what I want to get into and how I want to close out our time together, because when everyone comes, I always ask them about leadership and legacy. And so you've had a lot of ups and downs in your business career, a lot of starts and stops. You've involved a lot of people, like you've built a network through the businesses that you started. Do you have any guiding principles when it comes to leadership?
I think probably my eyes are telling you I don't have an answer for that question right away. What are guiding principles for leadership? I mean, my motivation from my heart and from this is like really my starting point is just I really just love people, and I love that life happened on this planet. It's just so beautiful and amazing, right? Like just out of nowhere and just like a bunch of rocks and ice. Like, boom, suddenly you have all these trees and all this, like all these wild humans with their antics.
All right.
I love it. And I just like, I just want to be a part. I want to help out. And I care about I care about what's good for people and my environment, and I care about I feel like a part of my orientation is checking the math and like trying to double check, like, okay, is this working? Is this like, what's the return on this effort here? Like, does this make sense? You know, like, and I think another basic operating principle of mine is just incredible sheer optimism. And I think that's kind of my MO, right? Like that's how I operate, and I don't know if those are good principles for leadership, but that's my way of doing it.
Yeah, well, they've gotten you to this point, and I think that everyone has contributed. I ask people that have actually that have built things, because I think all those perspectives, have evidence behind them around the things that they built, right?
Yeah.
And so the last thing is legacy. So you've met my grandmother, I think, at one of the galas.
Yeah.
And so I started my company named after her father. It's the Luther Harris Holding Company.
Oh, okay.
And he came up to San Francisco with like a 6th grade education. He worked for Muni for a time. He built a life here for himself and all of his children. And his legacy is important to me. Like his legacy informs how I think about my legacy. This is his dictionary.
That's such a cool artifact to have, a Luther's. Wow. Look at that tome. Look at how weighty that is. Oh, beautiful.
And these are his wife's chairs. We're sitting on his wife's chairs.
We're sitting at his wife's chairs.
Yeah. That's why you needed to stay in that chair.
Okay. All right.
And so these are representations of their legacy. Like, how do you think about your legacy?
Not to just like throw away what's important to you, but I really don't think about legacy very much. The first thing that comes to mind is just sort of like kind of like when I'm gardening now because I moved to Berkeley and I'm basic, so I gotta and I like the plants are gonna remember me. They don't care about me. That's fine. That's not why I do it. I just like this one. I like it when it grows up and thrives, I had a really sad thing happen in my life last year. My dad passed away. And it was, I had this really vivid dream of him like a couple nights ago. And and I can't even remember anything about it, like what happened, but it was just his presence, and I guess that's coming to mind for me because that's kind of like what legacy is like for me. It's just like, we're here for such a brief time, and we'll live on through the people who have really strong memories of us. But, what's really happening is you give it to the next generation. The world belongs to the next generation, and maybe one generation, maybe 5 if you're Luther, or maybe 20 if you're Luther. I don't know. Like, one day you'll be passed from memory, and you'll live on in these little strains of what you helped to shape in the world. But I don't really think about it as legacy exactly in the sense of like being remembered per se or whatever.
Well, thank you for that. Your time, sharing your story.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you.
Yeah, man. You're the homie. Thank you. Peace. And thank you for listening to another episode of Cook on Monday Morning. I'd like to give a special shout out and thank you to our guest, Shawn Drost, for telling his story about Hack Reactor. We weaved in and out of various other ventures that he's involved in. The founding of Mission Bit is directly connected to what he built. And I think it's a great reminder that, what we go out and produce in the world has ripple effects. And so if you've been thinking about that thing you want to start, I hope you go out and do it. I hope 2020 is the year that you make that happen. And that as you do it, you can also let us know how you're changing your Monday morning in order to do that. I'd also like to thank the people that made this podcast possible. I'd like to thank our videographer and producer, David Topete. Also like to thank Fernando and Cinco Marquez for editing the newsletter. I'd also like to thank everyone that has been sharing and subscribing to the newsletter. We've been on this journey to get to 2,020 subscribers by April 30th of 2020. You all have been inching us closer day by day, and I am truly grateful. This podcast is also for, and I also want to appreciate all the people that make San Francisco the beautiful, incredible place it is. They are our teachers, our school lunch workers, our first responders, the people that keep our streets clean, people that pick up our trash, people that drive our buses. You make San Francisco a beacon and you help it keep moving. Thank you. I'm your biggest fan. This podcast is for you. It's for everyone that is changing their Monday mornings, that's improving themselves in their communities. They live in cities like LA, Houston, Dallas, New Orleans, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit. Keep going, keep building, and thank you. Please connect with me if you have any questions or any feedback. You can find me on Twitter at Steven Cook. If you own a business and you're interested in any consulting support to help grow your business, I started a company called the Luther Harris Holding Company. We help companies with brand awareness, strategic advising, community engagement. I would love to sit down and talk to you about what your aspirations are, how we can work together to accomplish that. You can reach out to me via email, info@StevenCook, to get that conversation started. Please keep tuning in. Please keep reaching out. Peace, and we out.